I still remember the way my hands trembled when I looked at the little stick in my bathroom that morning. Then another, and another. For pregnancy tests in total, each one showing the same undeniable truth. I was pregnant. My heart raced with a mixture of fear and overwhelming joy. After years of waiting, it was finally happening. I was going to be a mother. Ryan and I were going to have a baby. The very same day, I went to the clinic in Columbus to be absolutely sure. The doctor confirmed it, 9 weeks along, healthy heartbeat, everything progressing as it should. I couldn't stop smiling. I even caught myself humming as I left the office, holding the ultrasound referral in my hand as if it were a ticket to a brighter future. Ryan will be so happy, I thought. He had always talked about family in vague terms, never with urgency, but I believed deep down he wanted this too. I spent the rest of that day planning a special dinner. I wanted it to be perfect when I told him. But as I chopped vegetables and set the table, memories began to drift back. Memories that had been sleeping for years but never truly gone. Back in high school, there was Daniel Hayes. He wasn't just a classmate. He was my closest friend, my shield, my constant shadow. Daniel was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of boy who could silence bullies with a single look. And he did often for my sake. He was always there, always watching out for me. What I never allowed myself to acknowledge, at least not then, was that Daniel was in love with me. Everyone in school seemed to know it. Everyone but me, or maybe I just chose to ignore it. Then came Ryan. He transferred to our school in the middle of junior year. He was charming, confident in a way that drew people in instantly. All the girls noticed him, and I was no exception. There was something about his smile that felt like a secret meant only for me. Before long, we were inseparable. Daniel tried to hide it, but I could see the way his jaw tightened whenever Ryan walked into the room. He never said it directly, but the message was always there in his eyes. Ryan isn't who you think he is. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to believe that the boy who made me feel so alive might have darker motives. Daniel's warnings only made me defensive. If he really cared about me, I thought, why couldn't he just be happy for me? There was one night, though, that I'll never forget. After a school event, Ryan and I were walking through the park when a group of older boys cornered us. They shoved Ryan to the ground, sneering, ready to take things further. My heart pounded in my throat, and before I could even scream, Daniel appeared out of nowhere. He fought them off with a ferocity I'd never seen, sending them scattering into the dark. I rushed to Ryan, grateful he wasn't badly hurt, but instead of thanking Daniel, Ryan brushed him off with irritation. He hated the idea of being saved, especially by someone he saw as a rival. Daniel stood there, bruised and breathing heavily, and for the first time I saw the truth in his eyes. Anger, yes, but also something purer. He wasn't angry at me. He was angry because he saw what I refused to see. Ryan wasn't a protector. He wasn't selfless. He only thought of himself. Back then I pushed the thought away. I told myself Daniel was just jealous, that he didn't understand how much Ryan and I loved each other. But as I set the table in my small kitchen years later, smiling at the thought of Ryan becoming a father, those old doubts stirred faintly inside me. I silenced them, of course. Tonight was about joy. Tonight was about sharing the news that would change our lives forever. Or at least that was what I believed. After high school, our paths seemed to spread in different directions, though I clung to the belief that Ryan and I were building something real. I had gone to beauty school in Columbus and started working as a stylist. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and I was proud to be standing on my own 2 feet. My dream was simple, to save enough to open my own little salon one day. Ryan, on the other hand, dreamed of stages and bright lights. He enrolled in a theater program, auditioned for plays, and spent countless hours chasing roles that never seemed to materialize. At first, I admired his passion, but reality crept in quickly. The rent still had to be paid, groceries had to be bought, bills piled up, and more often than not, it was my paycheck that kept us afloat. Ryan brushed it off, promising that someday his big break would come and we'd laugh about these struggles. I wanted to believe him, so I did. Meanwhile, Daniel Hayes had become a financial analyst. I heard through the grapevine that he had done well for himself. Even started his own consulting business. We didn't talk often anymore, but every so often I'd see his name pop up in a community article or hear about him from mutual acquaintances. It always stirred something in me, a sense of pride, maybe regret for the distance between us. Daniel had always been solid, dependable. He was the kind of man people leaned on. And though he never said a word, I sometimes wondered if he was still watching out for me in his own quiet way. Megan Brooks, my best friend since childhood, was less subtle. She never hid her dislike for Ryan. She said he was using me, living off my sacrifices, and that one day I'd wake up and realize I had wasted years on someone who didn't deserve me. Her words stung, of course, not because I believed them, but because deep down I feared she might be right. Still, I defended Ryan every time. He's just waiting for his chance, I'd say. He loves me, you just don't see it. I needed her to believe it because I needed to believe it myself. One afternoon, I ran into Daniel by pure accident. I was leaving a store downtown when he appeared, looking almost exactly the same, but sharper somehow. More confident, more sure of himself. He smiled, and for a moment I felt 16 again. We talked for a while, catching up on the years gone by. He asked about my work, about my mother, about Megan. And then, with a careful look, he asked the question I had been avoiding for years. Why hasn't Ryan married you yet? I froze. My heart thudded in my chest. I muttered something about how marriage was just a piece of paper, how Ryan and I didn't need it to prove our love. Daniel didn't argue, but the silence between us said enough. He didn't believe me, and maybe I didn't either. That evening, when Ryan came home, I tried to bring it up gently. I asked him if he had ever thought about setting a date, about making things official. He laughed it off, kissed me quickly, and said we were fine the way we were. Why complicate things with a wedding right now? We've got other priorities, he told me. And then he changed the subject, just like that. I told myself not to be disappointed, but I was. For the first time, I saw it clearly. I was dreaming of a future, while Ryan was dodging responsibility. Megan's words echoed in my head. Daniel's question hung heavy in my chest. I wanted so badly to believe that Ryan loved me the way I loved him, but a shadow of doubt had already crept in. That night, I set the table with more care than I had in months. I laid out candles, his favorite pasta, even a bottle of wine to make it feel special. My hands shook with excitement. This wasn't just dinner. It was the moment I'd tell Ryan he was going to be a father. I pictured his face lighting up, imagined him sweeping me into his arms, maybe even talking about marriage at last. When he came home, I noticed immediately that something was off. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled, and as he pulled it over his head to shower before dinner, I saw it, red marks down his back. Long, unmistakable scratches. My heart stilled. "What's that on your back?" I asked, trying to sound casual though my chest was tight. He didn't even flinch. That? Probably from my costume at rehearsal. The buttons scratched me when I was changing. Nothing serious. He said it so smoothly, as if he had rehearsed the line. I wanted to press, to demand the truth, but instead I swallowed my suspicion. Maybe it really was nothing. Tonight was supposed to be happy. I refused to ruin it. We sat down to dinner, and after a few bites, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Ryan," I said, my voice trembling, "I went to the doctor today. I'm pregnant." He froze, fork halfway to his mouth. His face went pale, his eyes darting away from mine. "Pregnant? You're serious?" "Yes," I whispered, a small smile breaking through my nerves. 9 weeks. We're going to have a baby." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, finally, he muttered, "I don't know if we're ready for this. We're still young, Amanda. We can't even take care of ourselves half the time. How are we supposed to raise a child?" His words cut through me like ice. I had been waiting for joy, for celebration. Instead, I felt the air leave my lungs. "But we've talked about this before," I said desperately. "You said one day we'd—" "One day," he interrupted. "Not now." Tears burned my eyes, but before I could crumble completely, I saw him shift. His expression softened, and he reached across the table to take my hand. "Hey, don't cry. I didn't mean it like that. It's just unexpected. But if this is what you want, then fine. We'll have the baby. I'll support you." The relief that washed over me was immediate and overwhelming. He wasn't thrilled, but he wasn't leaving me either. I convinced myself that this was just shock that he'd come around. I told myself he loved me, and that was enough. In the days that followed, Ryan played the role of the concerned partner almost too well. He insisted we avoid intimacy for the baby's sake, saying he didn't want to risk causing harm. At first, it touched me, proof, I thought, that he was willing to sacrifice for our child. But deep down, I felt the sting of rejection. The timing, the sudden distance. It gnawed at me in ways I didn't want to admit. When I shared the news with Megan, she listened quietly, her face unreadable. Then she said, "Amanda, don't you see what he's doing? He doesn't want to touch you because he's already getting what he wants somewhere else. Those scratches on his back. You really believe that button story?" I bristled, defensive. "Not everything has to be some big betrayal, Megan. He's just being careful. He loves this baby already. He loves me." She sighed, shaking her head. "I hope you're right. But to me, it looks like the same old Ryan. Selfish, dishonest, and using you to prop up his life." Her words lingered long after she left. I wanted to dismiss them, to wrap myself in the picture of a devoted father-to-be. I told myself Ryan was simply nervous, unprepared, but deep down I couldn't shake the feeling that Megan saw something I refused to see. Still, I clung to hope. I told myself love was enough, that Ryan would change once he held our child in his arms. And so I smiled through the doubt, convincing myself that everything would be fine. Not long after the shock of Ryan's initial reaction to my pregnancy, he surprised me with an idea that seemed, on the surface, thoughtful. One evening, as we sat in our small 2-bedroom apartment, he looked around with a critical eye. "You know," he began, his tone casual, "this place is fine for now, but once the baby comes, it's going to feel cramped. Don't you think we should start looking for something bigger? Maybe a 3-bedroom, somewhere closer to a park or a school?" At first, I hesitated. My grandfather had left me this apartment, a modest but cozy place in a good part of Columbus. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. More than that, it carried the weight of family history, memories tied to every corner. "I don't know," I admitted. "It's paid off. We don't have to worry about a mortgage. Maybe we could just renovate the 2nd bedroom into a nursery." Ryan shook his head quickly. "Renovating's a waste of time. Think bigger, Amanda. We're starting a family. Don't you want our baby to grow up in a real home? Besides, this way we could sell this place and use the money as a down payment on something new. Something ours." The word ours hit me in the chest. He was making it sound like this was about unity, about building a life together. I wanted to believe that. "I'd need to talk to my mom," I said quietly. He frowned. "Why? It's your apartment, our apartment. We don't need anyone else's permission. Families make decisions together. You and me, Amanda. That's all that matters." It sounded so convincing at the time, like a declaration of loyalty. I nodded, pushing away my doubts. Then, almost as if the universe wanted to test me, I was rushed to the hospital weeks later with severe cramping. The doctors called it a threatened miscarriage, and I was put on strict bed rest. Lying in that sterile hospital room, all I could think about was keeping my baby safe. Ryan visited with flowers and a smile, telling me not to worry. One night, he leaned against the hospital wall and said, "Listen, babe, we can't lose the apartment deal while you're stuck here. I talked to the realtor. If you give me power of attorney, I can handle everything. I'll make sure we get the perfect place before the baby arrives." I hesitated, pen hovering above the papers. My mother's voice echoed in my head. Never sign something without knowing exactly what it means. But Ryan's eyes were steady, his voice gentle. Trust me, Amanda. I'll take care of it. For you. For the baby. And so, against a tiny knot of unease in my stomach, I signed. When Megan found out, her reaction was explosive. She came to my hospital room the next day, her face pale with fury. You did what? She snapped. I gave Ryan power of attorney. Just until I get out. It's not a big deal, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Not a big deal. Megan nearly shouted. Amanda, you just handed him the knife to stab you with. Do you have any idea what you've done? He can sell that apartment out from under you and disappear, and you won't have a single legal claim to stop him. Her words cut deep, not because I believed them, but because they scared me. I lashed out, desperate to shut her down. Why are you always against him? Is it because you can't stand seeing someone happy when you lost your own fiancé? You don't get to project your bitterness onto my life. The instant the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Megan's fiancé had died in a car accident barely a year before. The pain in her eyes at my outburst was sharper than any knife. She stood there in silence for a moment, then shook her head. I hope for your sake I'm wrong, she said softly before walking out. After she left, guilt twisted inside me, but I clung to Ryan's promises like a lifeline. Later, when I told my mother about the decision, she looked stricken. Amanda, are you sure you can trust him with something like this? That apartment was your grandfather's legacy. I forced a smile, though my throat ached. Mom, he's changing. He wants to build a future with me. You'll see. But her silence told me she wasn't convinced. And truth be told, neither was I. The new apartment was bigger, brighter, and closer to the park. On the surface, it seemed like the fresh start Ryan had promised. I told myself this was proof that he was growing up, finally taking responsibility as we prepared to welcome our child. Some evenings he'd bring me tea, rub my swollen feet, or place a protective hand on my belly as if to remind me he was present, committed. Those moments made my heart swell. I convinced myself Megan had been wrong, that my mother's doubts were unfounded. He's trying, I told myself. This is the man I always knew he could be. But the cracks never fully disappeared. Ryan still didn't hold a steady job. He bounced between auditions, complaining when he didn't land a part, blaming the industry instead of his own lack of effort. He slept late, played video games, and spent hours on his phone while I dragged myself to work each morning, swollen ankles and all. When I brought it up, he brushed me off with a laugh. Come on, Amanda. Soon enough we'll have a baby crying all night. Let me enjoy sleep while I can. I smiled weakly, but inside I felt the growing weight of loneliness. My mother visited less often. She said she didn't want to argue, but her eyes always lingered on Ryan with quiet suspicion. Megan, meanwhile, stayed away entirely after our fight. We hadn't spoken in weeks, and the silence between us cut deeper than I liked to admit. So I clung to Ryan, even when he failed me. I told myself the baby would change everything, that once he held our child, he would transform into the husband and father I needed. I imagined family walks in the park, bedtime stories, Ryan kissing me on the forehead as we tucked our baby into the crib. Those dreams kept me moving forward, even when reality suggested otherwise. As the months passed, the due date crept closer. I was exhausted but excited. One afternoon at a prenatal checkup, a kind-looking older nurse with graying hair studied my chart while I sat nervously on the exam table. She glanced up and said, "Good thing you decided to keep the baby." I blinked, confused. What do you mean?" She gave me a small smile, almost as if she knew a secret. "When you were admitted a few months ago, the doctors said there were traces of certain herbs in your system. Dangerous ones. The kind some women use to end a pregnancy early. They said, you must have changed your mind. I think you did the right thing. Children are life's greatest blessing." My stomach turned to ice. Herbs? End a pregnancy? I shook my head quickly. No, that's not possible. I never took anything like that. Ever. The nurse frowned slightly, clearly puzzled. Well, that's what the test showed. Maybe you didn't know what you were drinking. Sometimes family remedies can be stronger than people realize. I could barely hear her after that. My mind reeled, racing back to those nights in the hospital, to the tea Ryan had brought me, to the way he urged me to rest while he handled everything with the apartment. Could it be? No. I forced the thought down. Ryan loved this baby. He had to, but a seed of doubt had been planted, and it sank its roots deep into my chest. On the way home, I pressed a hand to my belly, whispering to the life inside me, "You're safe. I won't let anything happen to you." Yet, even as I said the words, I couldn't shake the fear that someone else, someone I trusted, had already tried. I still remember the sterile smell of the delivery room, the blinding white lights, and the way time seemed to stretch into eternity as I clutched the sides of the bed, fighting through waves of pain. Hours blurred into each other until finally I heard that first cry, the cry I had been waiting for, the sound that split the world in two. My son was here, my Ethan. The doctor placed him gently in my arms, and I was overwhelmed with a love so fierce it felt like my chest would burst. His tiny fingers curled instinctively around mine, his skin warm, fragile, alive. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I whispered, "Welcome, baby. You're safe now." For a moment, it was as if the room disappeared, as if all the loneliness and fear of the past months had been washed away by this one miracle. But then came the hollow realization: Ryan wasn't there. He had promised, sworn, that he would be by my side. Yet when I looked around, all I saw were nurses in scrubs, no familiar face, no hand to hold. I told myself he must have been delayed, caught in traffic, maybe stuck with some last-minute work. I wanted to believe it, needed to believe it. Later, when they wheeled me into recovery, I asked the nurse if he had arrived. She shook her head gently, a look of pity in her eyes. I pressed my lips together, forcing a smile, and whispered, "He'll come tomorrow. He just couldn't make it in time." The next morning, he finally showed up. He strolled in with a bouquet of cheap flowers, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes slightly bloodshot. "Hey, babe," he said casually, as if he had just stepped in from the grocery store. He kissed my forehead quickly before peering down at Ethan. "So that's him, huh?" His tone was flat, almost mechanical. I tried to laugh it off. "Yes, that's our son. Isn't he beautiful?" I waited for some spark, some sign of pride or joy, but Ryan just shrugged. "He looks like a baby. I don't know, they all look the same at this age." His words pierced me deeper than he realized. But I stayed silent, convincing myself he was just overwhelmed, maybe nervous. Still, when Ethan started to fuss, Ryan handed him back to me almost immediately, saying he's hungry or something. "You know what to do." By the third day, while I was still sore and struggling to move, Ryan announced he was going out just for a quick drink with the guys. I stared at him, disbelieving. "You're leaving? Now?" He rolled his eyes. "Amanda, don't start. I've been here, haven't I? I just need a break. Don't be so dramatic." I wanted to scream, to beg him to stay, but instead I swallowed the lump in my throat and watched him walk away. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone with our newborn, tears slipping silently down my face. That night, as Ethan slept against my chest, I remembered Megan's warning. Her voice echoed in my mind, "He'll never change. You'll carry the weight alone." And for the first time, I felt the seed of doubt take root, spreading quietly in the cracks of my heart. The morning before my discharge, I sat by the hospital window, cradling my son in my arms. The world outside seemed quiet, covered in a veil of pale spring light, as if nothing had changed. But my world had already cracked. I was exhausted, yet a fragile thread of hope still pulsed inside me. I thought maybe once Ryan held Ethan, maybe once he saw his own son's tiny fists, something in him would finally awaken. I reached for my phone, expecting a missed call or at least a message asking how we were doing. Instead, there was a new voice note. Ryan's name lit up the screen. My heart leapt. Maybe it was the apology I'd been waiting for. Maybe he was finally ready to step up. I pressed play. His voice came through, low and flat, slurred slightly as if he'd been drinking. Amanda, I can't do this anymore. I never wanted the kid. I never wanted this life. For 4 years I've been with someone else. Someone who actually makes me feel alive. I'm leaving with her. The apartment? Already sold. The money's mine now. And don't worry, I signed the papers. I'm giving up my rights as the father. You're on your own. My hand trembled so violently I nearly dropped the phone. I felt my chest cave in, my breath stolen like someone had struck me. I replayed it again, hoping I had misheard. But no, every word was clear, cold, calculated. He wasn't done. There was another recording, his tone almost mocking this time. Remember when you thought I got jumped outside the bar? When you patched me up and cried, thinking you almost lost me? That was a setup. I wanted you to pity me, to keep you hooked. Worked, didn't it? You always were so easy to fool. The phone slipped from my hand onto the bed. My body went numb, as though I had fallen into icy water. My son stirred gently against me, his breath warm and innocent. The weight of him was the only thing anchoring me to reality. I stared at the hospital wall, my mind reeling. He had stolen our home. He had abandoned us. And worse, he admitted to deceiving me, manipulating me, and maybe even trying to harm our baby before he was born. Suddenly, the nurse's words about the herbal traces echoed in my ears like a siren. My stomach churned. Betrayal was too small a word. This wasn't just a man walking away. This was destruction, deliberate and cruel. This wasn't betrayal anymore. This was a crime. I pressed my lips against my son's soft hair, holding him tighter as tears streamed down my cheeks. My voice cracked as I whispered, I will never let anyone hurt you again. The future I had clung to, Ryan holding our son, Ryan standing beside me as a father, Ryan finally becoming the man I believed he could be, shattered into dust. All that was left was the raw truth. I had been living with a mask, a stranger wearing the face of a husband. And now, as I sat there in the sterile hospital room with my newborn son, I realized the cruelest truth of all. Ryan hadn't simply abandoned us. He had erased us from the life we built together, like we never existed. But if he thought I would stay broken, he was wrong. Something inside me, something deeper than pain, had begun to stir. When I was discharged from the hospital, there was no one waiting for me at the entrance. I clutched my newborn son tightly against my chest, tears blurring my vision as the cold wind swept across the parking lot. For a moment, I felt invisible, abandoned, and stripped of every illusion I had once held. My body was weak, my heart even weaker, and I whispered to my son, It's just you and me now, baby. We'll figure this out somehow. And then, through my haze of despair, I saw a sleek black car pulling up. The door opened, and out stepped Daniel, dressed sharply, holding a massive bouquet of white lilies. He walked straight toward me with such certainty that the world seemed to pause. Without a word, he gently took the heavy diaper bag from my shoulder, then carefully adjusted my son's blanket. His voice was soft, steady. You're not alone, Amanda. Let me take you home. The ride back was surreal. The contrast between my devastation and Daniel's quiet strength was overwhelming. I kept staring out the window, unable to stop the tears, while Daniel drove with a kind of patience that made me feel safe for the first time in a very long time. When we arrived at my mother Linda's house, the sight that greeted me nearly broke me all over again. My mom was waiting on the porch, her arms already open wide. Beside her stood Megan, the sister I hadn't spoken to since our cruel fight. My knees buckled under the weight of emotion. I barely managed to whisper, Mom, Megan, before Linda pulled me into her embrace, careful not to crush the baby between us. Megan stepped forward hesitantly, her eyes swollen from crying. Amanda, I'm sorry, she said, her voice cracking. I should have believed you. I should have been there. For a second, I wanted to push her away, to hold onto the bitterness that had fueled me. But then I saw the way she looked at my son, her nephew, and I felt something inside me soften. My voice was weak, but sincere. We both made mistakes. But I need you now. Megan threw her arms around me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't drowning. Inside, after I laid the baby down in a crib my mother had lovingly prepared, Daniel cleared his throat. His expression was grave. Amanda, you need to know the truth. I've been digging into Ryan's activities. My stomach tightened as he handed me a folder filled with documents. Bank transfers, property sales, even fake IDs. Daniel continued, his voice steady but edged with anger. Ryan didn't just leave you. He sold your apartment. He emptied your accounts. And he was preparing to flee the country with his mistress. But he won't get far. I've already alerted the authorities. They intercepted him at the airport this morning. I staggered back, my hand flying to my mouth. You mean he's been arrested? Daniel nodded. Yes. And Amanda, there's more. That night, when he claimed he was attacked outside your building, it was staged. He paid 2 men to rough him up just enough so you'd pity him and stay. My knees gave out, and I collapsed into the nearest chair. The betrayal cut deeper with every revelation, and yet, beneath the anguish, there was relief. A strange, trembling relief that I was finally free from his web of lies. Daniel knelt beside me, his hand covering mine with warmth and certainty. I'm not here to replace anyone. I just want you to know, I've got your back. Always. Tears rolled down my face, but this time they weren't just tears of despair. For the first time since Ryan's voice shattered me in that voicemail, I felt a flicker of hope. I had my son, I had my family, and whether I was ready to admit it or not, I had Daniel. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start over. Ryan's arrest felt like the closing of a book I should have burned long ago. The authorities wasted no time. Fraud, assault, embezzlement. Every crime he had hidden beneath his polished smile was laid bare. For once, he couldn't manipulate or talk his way out of it. He was led away in handcuffs, his eyes darting around the courtroom like a trapped animal. Watching him fall wasn't triumph, it was justice. Justice for me, for my son, for every year I had wasted believing his lies. In the quiet aftermath, guilt washed over me like a tide I couldn't hold back. I thought of the nights I defended him to my mother, the times I chose him over Megan, the years I silenced my instincts because I wanted to believe in love. One evening, as we sat around Linda's kitchen table, I looked at her and Megan with tears in my eyes. I was blind, I admitted, and I hurt both of you by choosing him over the truth. My voice broke, but neither of them turned away. Linda reached across the table, her hands warm and steady. Megan's eyes softened. You don't have to apologize anymore, she whispered. You're here now. That's what matters. Their forgiveness was not only a relief, it was a lifeline. Days blurred into weeks, but instead of grief, my life began to fill with something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Daniel was a constant presence, steady as the ground beneath me. He never tried to replace what I'd lost, never pushed his way in. Instead, he built a space where I felt safe again, where my son could grow up without shadows hanging over him. Then one afternoon, everything shifted. Daniel had asked me to step outside. The late sun painted the garden in gold. Linda and Megan were there too, sitting quietly as if they already knew what was about to happen. My heart raced. Daniel turned to me, his expression serious but tender, and then he went down on one knee. Amanda, he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion, you've been through storms that would have broken anyone else. But you're still here, stronger than ever. I don't want to just stand by your side. I want to build a life with you and with your son. Will you marry me? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. All the pain, all the betrayal, all the nights I thought I'd never recover. They condensed into a single tear that slipped down my cheek. "Yes," I whispered. Then louder, through trembling lips. "Yes." Daniel slipped the ring onto my finger, and the world seemed to exhale. Linda clapped a hand to her mouth. Megan grinned through her tears, and my son giggled in my arms as if he understood that something had shifted forever. That night, as I stood by the window with my baby cradled against me and Daniel's hand entwined with mine, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. My story was no longer about loss or betrayal or survival. It was about new beginnings. After everything, I finally found a home, a real family.